We're not like Netflix. I don't raise prices twice or three times a year just for the hell of it. I actually fired my first client last month. You could have 50,000 followers and be making mid six figures, which is more than 99% of America.
Varun, so I'm very excited to chat. I've been a, I guess you can call me, I'm a unique type of creator. I've been running the internet now for 5 years. But you specifically have been running an agency that takes creators and gets their operations in a good spot. Um, Tell us a bit about that, because that's kind of a side of creatorship that people don't see a lot. Tell us about like how did this come about?
Yeah. So I guess just to tell you a little bit about boring stuff, we do back office work for content creators, and basically the need came from I guess like I fell into it on accident. I am not a CPA or an enrolled agent, but my dad is in New York, so I knew how to bookkeep and I know how to read tax returns. So I usually consider myself a business manager who knows a lot about taxes, which is very rare in the creator economy. About 6 years ago during the pandemic, I was kind of in a weird place job wise, and I was bookkeeping on the side. And I got introduced to a YouTube skateboarding creator who was a friend of a friend. And it was a very interesting and unique space for me. I'd never really worked in that space before. But essentially, what was unique about him was that he was also selling clothes in like the videos. So like he would film the videos, sell the clothes, use the proceeds to make more videos. And it was a very interesting flywheel. And he also had like a lot of data because YouTube gives you a lot of data in terms of who's watching, who's like clicking into your links, etc. And, I realized very quickly that, there was a way to sort of optimize his operations and like help him out a bit. So, I started off as his bookkeeper, but I told him like, hey, listen, if you want to increase sales, your data is indicating that, you should appeal to more people in Brazil, which is like has a very big skateboarding community. And we tried that out and his sales increased about 9%. And, from then on there, he started giving me more and more to do. And I became his operations manager. And working firsthand with a creator, I realized like how chaotic it is, right? Like I think working with any artist is chaotic, but especially in creatordom, where anybody can become famous and essentially like, you were thrust into the spotlight and you get all of this money and attention and responsibility that most people are not prepared for, nor should they be, right? Because they don't really tell you about all of the tax consequences and the headaches that come with like, hiring employees and whatnot. And I worked with him for about 2.5 years. And, I was just like, man, if he needs help, I can't imagine like what other creators are thinking of as well. So I simultaneously while working with him got my MBA at UCLA, and after I graduated I went to go work for a YouTube manager by the name of Zach Honavar, who has some really big clients like Airac and Yes Theory, and he also had independently come to the same conclusion. So I was working in-house for him for a few months and we really enjoyed working together, and we were like, hey, the market has a huge need for this, let's spin this off into a separate company, which is where boring stuff came into play.
Interesting. And like, so you, because when I think about creator businesses, I assume most of them are ad revenue based. But you were able to look at the business strategy behind the skateboarding business and be like, okay, we should sell more in Brazil, right? How much of what you do is the business strategy side, which is like, I imagine these people are great at being a creator, but may not know like where they should allocate where they should allocate products, where they should sell more, increase prices, that kind of stuff. Is that things you do, or is it purely the boring stuff to name your business? Right.
We do that, but I think the scalable and repeatable part is the boring stuff. Everybody is going to be different, especially when it comes to corporate strategy. It is a capability that we have, but it's not something we go and beat the pavement with, because to reach that level where you do need to start thinking about product differentiation, you're going to be in the top like 5% of creators. And it's obviously like everybody wants to get there. But my philosophy on that is, I don't think everybody needs to be Mr. Beast. I think we see a lot of traction with micro creators as well, right? Like you could have 50,000 followers and be making like mid six figures, which is more than 99% of America. And if you do it properly, you can keep that up for many, many years and invest wisely. And you will, again, end up better than 99% of Americans versus like, if you try to throw that money into chasing more money, the odds of that failing are very high. So, when we talk about corporate strategy and what my company can do for our clients, Yes, we do that, but I will say the more repeatable, scalable stuff is the bookkeeping and the taxes.
And so why? Because that's an interesting choice, right? Because you have essentially you can decide whether you want to go toward the route of helping people make a lot more money in terms of like corporate strategy, right? Do I focus on this product? Do I increase prices, et cetera, and then take a percent of that? Or what you've been talking about is scalability, repeatability, like how consistent is it? And you chose the consistency side. What made you make that decision?
I think two things. Number one, I feel like taking percentages is a perverse incentive. The way we work at Boring Stuff is we have a monthly retainer and the price is the price. We have a scoping documents. I do an intro call and then, I'll send over a price to my clients, or prospective clients and be like, hey, this is where I think you're at. This is what it is. It's all in monthly cost. There may be some add-ons here and there depending on like how crazy you want to get. But for the most part, that's what it is. We're not going to take a percentage of your revenue because when you start taking a percentage of the revenue, I think then you really get involved and you're making decisions that could blow up in your face. And why I picked the
Yeah,
consistency is, to be honest, like everybody needs to do bookkeeping and taxes, like no matter who you are. And I
yeah,
want it to be the business that could be, you could come to and get a reliable service for that, especially in this industry. I feel like most of my intro calls or all of the other like talks I have with people throughout the industry is just like, this is such an interesting field that not a lot of classic accountants know about or know what to do with. Even my own dad, like wonderful CPA, he can do a convenience store taxes like in his sleep. He still asks me questions about like how are they making money? How is this profitable? Like what
right.
exactly is going on? So I can't imagine like, if you're a food creator in Iowa and you get big, like the guy down the street from you has any idea what's going on. And, again, I don't think they need to. I don't think it's something they're prepared for, right? Like we don't do farm taxes, but what I want to be is the place where you can go and like, there is somebody to help you versus you being like, what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah, and the that choice for consistency, I think I remember we mentioned earlier. Did it come from a specific moment, like you watched a creator just like blow up a business in their face and say, "I want consistency, not explode up and explode down," you know?
Yeah, actually, I think it goes back to my first skateboarding client, right?
Yeah.
He had a lot of overhead because he had a warehouse downtown. He had employees. He was making videos, etc. But there would be some months where he wouldn't drop clothes or he wouldn't drop a video, so there was no AdSense coming. And that's because he was a perfectionist, and I think that's fine. A lot of really great creators are perfectionists. The issue was, while there were other things in the business scaling, the one thing that he didn't let anybody else touch was the content and the editing. So he did it all himself. He had filmers, he had other skaters, but like the actual edit was him and he was the bottleneck. So if he didn't think the video was good enough, it wasn't going to go out. And obviously the videos were good, but they weren't being released at the rate that you needed to in order to run the rest of the business. And obviously when you're somebody's financial advisor and like trying to juggle all of these balls, it's not very helpful, if the balls are covered in oil and, things are on fire.
Yeah.
So I just kind of saw this cyclical nature and creator businesses by and large are cyclical just due to the nature of ad sales and how the social media platforms operate. So just looking at this and looking like how I wanted to run my business, I value the consistency above all else, and I think that's the
Yeah.
space to play in.
Got it. So you're on the revenue side, on the offer side, it tends to be more MRR focused, less project focused, more consistency. And then on the structure and delivery side, like how you actually fulfill for your clients, you've also structured it very kind of consistent, let's call it, right? Like how did you set up the delivery side?
So a lot of trial and error, obviously, over my years of being a business manager. But essentially, our process is people come in through us to the site. We give them a form to fill out, and then they schedule an intro call with me and my team. I have a chat with them based on the answers in the form, and I'm very, very militant about not taking this call before you fill out the form for a few reasons. Number one, I hate landmines. If I see a landmine that just blows up my entire system, like for example, if I get on a call with you, you haven't filled out the form, we sign a contract, and then I find out you haven't filed taxes in 3 years, that completely changes everything. And like I am not like I have to reorient my team, get some special resources, which I could have foreseen had that form been filled out, right? So I'm pretty militant about that. Two, I also want to see how you are to deal with as a client, right? This is not a problem unique to creators. I think this is more of an accounting firm problem. But problem clients will cost you money and time. And like communication is a very big skill of it. So I want to see like how well you communicate, how well can you take direction, like if I need something from you. So that is part of the process, right? And then once we have that, once I know what to do, then I can sort of break it into chunks, right? Like if we need to do your books, I get on an onboarding call with you. I know what I need access to. I know how to set up your QuickBooks. Everybody's relatively the same. We have a standard chart of accounts that we use for everyone. We just upload it into QuickBooks and then we clean up your books. And then every month we will send you a report in our standard template. We'll tell you, hey, here's what's going on with your business. Here's how much your revenue increased. Here's how much your costs increased or decreased. Here's your net income. If you want to chat about any of it, let us know. And then there are some people, like as you alluded to, who are like, hey, how do I get my revenue up? How do I bring my costs down? And we can have those
Yeah.
conversations. But for the most part, most people are like, okay, that makes sense. That's in line with what I decided to do with my business. I'm glad things are going well. And we can repeat and rinse that across multiple clients for, ad infinitum. And that's what we're trying to do.
And what's most of your service line? Because it sounds like it's finance and taxes is most of it, right? And then you do some operations and some corporate strategy, right? Is it 70% finance and taxes?
Yeah, I would say that. The other two main lines we have are operations, which mainly manifests itself in AP and AR services. So we do invoicing. The invoicing is a little hard to scale because everybody is different. Everyone has a different invoicing system. And then the vendors you work with all have their own different payment systems. I think where our advantage comes in from is like we have just been doing enough invoicing in the space that we know the systems people use. We know like the tricks that happen, right? For example, there are some agencies that we work with constantly who are like, you need a PO number and you need to send the W-9 in on the second Tuesday of, the fifth month after the invoice. And it's like, yeah, we've dealt with this before. So like, that's kind of where the scale and the reps come in on that. And then the third service line is HR, actually. When a creator gets big enough, HR tends to be a big problem that they haven't really thought about, especially when you need to get people on a W-2 payroll. So what we do there is we help them register with their respective state. We get them on a payroll provider. We help, set up benefits and then, act as a singular point for their employees to come talk to, right? Sort of like an HR department, except we don't do the hairier stuff like, sexual harassment or anything like that. But
Yeah.
we can like hire, we can fire, we can be the bad guy, we can do employee manuals. And again, that is like a little harder to scale because everybody's different. But I think where we get to that point is like my team and myself have done enough reps of that it is very like plug and play for 80% of it. The corporate strategy part is more so like a secret menu item. It's just something that we know how to do and have done for our like really, really big clients. And a lot of that business usually comes through word of mouth. But I've not found it really effective to like outwardly go and like hit the pavement to get clients on that because again, it's really only going to apply to a very small subsection of creators, and I'd rather focus my efforts on the scalable business that I can get.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like which one's most scalable? Is it the finance part or the ops part or the HR part?
It's definitely the finance part,
Yeah.
because I will say this. Like a lot of people say accounting is very easily scalable, and I'll say like yes, but with an asterisk because everybody is different, and that's kind of like similar
Right.
to what I was alluding to with the operations and the HR part. If I were to drop like you or somebody watching this who's never done this before, it would feel like Greek to you, right? And like I myself have made many mistakes over the course of my career, but I'm currently at the point I'm at because I have done enough repetitions and I've made enough mistakes that I know what's going on and I can also train my team to
Yeah.
know what's going on. And the finance and accounting part is the easiest because again, we can, make a standard chart of accounts. We know how to like generally where bookkeeping goes. It's like the little details though that come in that like you need to know like where to put in, and that's kind of like where we become like plumbers. Like for example, I just had a client, they're a multi-man partnership. They told me that 4 of the members out of 6 just bought an asset. And so we needed to record that on the books. That's a little more complicated than a standard journal entry or entry into a bookkeeping,
Right.
ledger. But we know how to do that, right? Because they told us and we're like, okay, great. We know what's coming. We can see it on your register. We will allocate it into the correct parts.
What about the HR part? Is that kind of plug and play too? Like what aspects of HR do you guys do? Because we do a lot of HR work too, and it can get super complicated.
It can get super complicated. I think the part that's easiest for us is number one, we have like employment contract. We have a template that we like
Yeah.
to use. So like it's very easy. We can plug and play that with any client that we have. And then also the process for registering payroll in states is pretty similar across the states. They all like differ in terms of like how you register. And like some states will give you the payroll number immediately. Some will mail them to you. Some will like call you for more information. But it's also just like setting expectations with the clients about like, hey, here's what we're doing and here's what's going to happen. And then once you get that, easy to set you up on a payroll provider like Gusto and Rippling. We have experience with them, ADP, all of the big tools out there. And then once that's set up and you can just auto run it, most of the work is done from there. After that, it's management. It's like changing things if need be. It's like responding to workers' comp audit requests. And it can get complicated, but I think the thing that makes it scalable is that, you know, you have somebody like me who's done this a bunch and can also train it to people and be like, these are the patterns you need to look out for, and here are the variations so that you can adjust yourself and know like what to expect.
And is part of that, because that sounds like you've figured out how to take the parts of HR that fit well into your business and absorb those. Do you do any of the, because there's other parts of HR too, like training, recruiting, hiring, managing, that kind of stuff. Is any of that part of you guys too?
Yeah, we do some recruiting, but I would say that's more like very similar to corporate strategy in that it's like a very bespoke
Super.
solution that like we don't like outwardly advertise, but we have recruited for a lot of positions for some of our clients. You know, I've been in the digital space enough to know like how most of these positions work and what kind of people to look for. So it's very helpful in that regard. But it's I think the big overarching theme of my business is the scalable stuff, is the stuff that we
Yeah.
hit the pavement with. But it's also just like, you know, if you wanted something more bespoke, we can do it. I'm not going to turn you away, but you know, let's have a chat about it.
Yeah, got it, got it, got it. Okay. And so then on the HR front, it's the things that the on the menu things are the scalable stuff. That's the focus. The off menu things are things that kind of fit into it. You won't say no, you'll take money. Um, but that may not be as much of a fit. And so like those roles are those more the ops roles that fit into the boring stuff type work, or is it more like any roles that they need?
It's any roles that they need. Like we've recruited for editors, we've recruited for recruiters themselves, like internal recruiters. We have recruited like one client asked us to find an e-commerce manager for their e-commerce store. I have a lot of e-commerce experience. My co-founder Zach has a lot of e-commerce experience. It's
Yeah.
just like one of those things where it's like I think for the first time ever, actually, this week, you caught me at a good time, Brian. I had to turn down a potential opportunity because it was a guy I had met who works in traditional TV, and he wanted us to help him do accounting for a project that he's running. The issue was he wanted us to use some proprietary software that all the production houses use. And I was I like thought about it and I was very frank with him. I was like, listen, this works because like 99% of our clients are on QuickBooks, and like I have a back end portal. I can go to any client. My whole team knows
Yeah.
how to use it. It's like very easy. If I have to find some proprietary production only accounting software in either find a contractor or train myself on it, then train my team, I'm not going to be able to give you the level of service that you want. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to decline. So I do know my limits, but I will say like I've done a lot in this industry where it's at the point where I'm like, there's very little I have not seen. But I am always honest with people, and I always try to set expectations correctly so that nobody's disappointed.
I think what's impressive about what you've built is how focused you are on, call it the productization of it. Where if it's outside the scope, like I even heard you say when you were right, when you're bringing people on, when they're look at the qualifying form, it's like, how do you communicate with me? Right? It's
Hmm.
like you're interviewing your prospects to whether they have the right personality traits to work with you. Right? That's incredible.
Yeah.
And I imagine some of that is because like you have your every business is either supply constraint or demand constraint. It sounds like you're more supply constrained than you are demand constrained, right? Like do you have more demand than you're able to take on this side. Um, and so because of that, you can kind of structure the rules of engagement.
Correct. And I think it's
Yeah.
also a thing of how do I put it? I think I kind of alluded to this earlier, but a bad client, especially in an accounting firm, can poison the rest of the bunch. In terms of just like your team has to chase this person down, or like they have to explain something that's been explained before. And it's like, again, I'm happy to educate my clients. I'm happy to chat with everybody. Like I'm in the services industry. Everything is good. But like, for example, another good example, I actually fired my first client last month. And the reason for that was our engagement started well enough. He came to us to form his LLC and like get like formalized, and we did all of that. Everything was fine the first few months, and then he kind of stopped responding to us. And that got really problematic around tax season, especially like we got past the point where I was like, hey, we're going to put you on mandatory extension. And I needed to confirm some stuff with him, and he just never got back in touch with me. Lo and behold, April 15th at like 6 p.m., he gets in touch and he's like, hey, sorry, I was camping. And I file his extension. And then like it's another month of like me trying to get stuff from him not responding. And it got to the point where I was like, I looked at how much we charge him, how much time I'd spent chasing him down, and I was like, wow. If I was advising somebody in my shoes, I would have cut him long ago. So I did. And like that's kind of the way I look at things, especially when we're scaling the business, right? Like, as you mentioned, yes, I'll take money. Money is great. Money is good. But I am also seeing through trial and error that like you need to take the right money, and you need to like, for my services in particular, you need to be able and willing to do this, right? Like it's not broccoli. I'm not going to feed it to you. I'm not going to like say it's good for you to be financially secure, right? Like if you don't want to do this or you're treating this as a chore, it's quite frankly a waste of both of our times. And that is a big key pillar of like how I have also been able to scale this, because the clients want to be here and they want to learn and they want to do well.
What was that like firing a client?
Honestly, a lot easier than you might have thought. He wasn't picking up our calls, so I just like sent him a very polite email and was like, "Hey, we're good. Not going to charge you next month. Good luck. Here's your extension. Have a nice day." Still haven't heard back from him, so I hope he's okay. And if he is, I wish him luck.
That's a challenge we've had too. Is sometimes clients just ghost you, even though they've paid you money to do the thing. Um, and so we're always looking for tricks to get response rates up quicker. But it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so you've scaled the business now, but you've probably changed. I imagine you've changed the structure, or maybe tell us like how you structure today. So you have like what does your employee base look like? How do folks work? And then how has that changed over time?
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was literally just me. I was doing everything, right?
I imagine.
And yeah, we're bootstrapped as well. So it's good and bad in the sense of like, in the beginning it was just me. I was like, okay, if anything goes wrong with any of these businesses, like my salary is cooked. So I gotta think of that as well. And then we got to a point where I was like, okay, I literally can't do the bookkeeping myself. I need to hire, what I called at the time an operations associate. It was me and another guy for the longest time. And then I had some freelance bookkeepers because we didn't have that many clients, but like I couldn't be in the books anymore. So I had like four freelance bookkeepers doing about 5 to 7 accounts each, and then my associate like overseeing all of that. And we recently got to the point, like this is like a few months ago, where I think like the growth has really exploded. A few months ago, he and I sat down and we were like, okay, actually, I think we do need a full-time bookkeeper. So we just hired one 2 months ago. And then we were like, okay, I think we need another operations associate because like the work has gotten to that point. So, I have somebody starting next week. And then we have our project manager. We have a project manager overseas who, very happy accident, emailed me because she knew I was the business manager of one of our clients, was a big fan of them, wanted to
Okay.
see if they needed any help. And they didn't, but I did. And, I tried her out and she's been fantastic. And she basically handles all of our automation work, like, organizes our back end, basically does like all of our special projects. Like she's building on a client portal that we're trying to roll out to everybody. So currently we're at 5 people and we have about 50 clients. The ratio is not going to be 1 to 10. I know it works out that way at the moment. But right now I'm kind of more like eyeballing it just based on like how much work is going on and like how much people are working. Cause, all of my employees are remote. Like the closest one is in Orange County, and we only see each other like once a week. And Part of that is because one, I'm a big believer that you don't need office space in order to run an effective professional services business. We meet up a few times a year, but I don't have a formal office. I work out of my home, as you can see here. And two, I really like to trust people to be able to do their jobs. I think micromanagement is a failure on either the manager's side or the employee's side. And a lot of times I feel like it's on the manager's side because they don't have trust in their employees to do the work. So when I hire people and when I like really look for like what I'm looking for in a person, it's mainly somebody that I'm like, okay, can you learn quickly? Can you ask questions when you need to? And then can you do what I tell you to do with like minimal input slash me having to worry about you? Because at a certain point, right, like if I'm micromanaging you because I'm worried in your ability to do the job, at a certain point, I need to ask the question, like, should you be here? And thankfully, I have not had to do that in this current role. But I definitely have had to do that in the past, and it's also helped in terms of the scaling. So that's good.
Yeah, so it's an interesting choice that you have in terms of like what does the culture look like? Like, are you fully remote or are you fully in-house, or fully in person? So we just had someone on last week who was like, "Hey, we only do in person, right? The opposite, um, because then they get to like mold the culture and all that kind of stuff." And so remote is hard from a culture perspective. How do you think about managing culture remotely?
That's interesting. Because maybe this is just me as a person. I don't particularly buy into a lot of like norms around normal workplace dynamics, right? Like
Yeah.
for example, I think there's a common refrain of like, we're a family here. I'm like, listen, man, I have a family. My employees have families. I like everybody. I think everybody likes working with each other, but I'm also just like, we're not doing brain surgery at the end of the day. Like if we close shop tomorrow, I think some people would be angry and there might be some tax issues, but like the world wouldn't end. So like, when I think about who to hire and like what kind of culture I want to foster, I want to I'm trying to foster a culture of people who, are excited to come to work and will like provide a good service to our clients. And then beyond that, everybody's chill with each other, which is a lot easier to do when you're remote. And not saying that I have issues with that, but it's a lot easier not to get on somebody's nerves, like, when they're not microwaving fish in the break room or, like having to go to mandatory fun or whatever. Um, and that's kind of like where I see it going and where I see it going in terms of like a professional services firm. Because what I'm trying to mold with my team is that, like this is a very, very fast growing sector of a very fast growing sector. It's an underserved sector. There is a lot of opportunity here, and I'm willing to invest in the right people. And I believe that if I treat people well, I think the culture I'm trying to propagate is essentially one where people are happy to come to work and to do the job correctly. And I feel like a lot of other businesses lose sight of that in replacement of some sort of pseudo cult thing, which I've never really been a huge fan of. So, um, I don't think I'm ever really going to change from being 100% remote, especially because like a lot of my employees are very, very good at what they do. And, they have lives in other parts of the country that I'm like, I don't really need to uproot you for this. And I think like I've seen it work over the last few months, and it's just not something I'm particularly interested in.
Have you noticed any like cons or challenges with the fully remote?
Um, The only thing I would say is, and it's mainly with my overseas employees, just the time zone thing. But I will say the nature of her job and why I was open to her being overseas is it's not very time sensitive. So like I can
Yeah.
like give her a list of tasks and I'll wake up and it's done. And it's not like, I have to stay up till 3 a.m. doing it because the IRS portal is going to close or whatever. It's mainly like, hey, can you grab some files for us? Or like, hey, can you set up this automation for our email flow? Um, and then for the rest of the team, I have expectations in the sense of like, hey, be generally available during the day. During tax season, we're all going to be available 24/7, but we're all adults at the end of the day. As long as you get your work done and you show up to calls, I don't really care what you do. And I have not seen too much of a downside for that yet. So, if that becomes a problem in the future, I guess we can discuss that in a future episode, but it's been working well so far.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if like the benefit of how productized your service is, um, means that it's easier to find folks who will be a great fit for you guys.
I agree. I think a lot of it is like, because like one of my basic requirements for most of the people who work here is that I need you to know how to bookkeep. You may
Yeah.
not necessarily be bookkeeping day in and day out, but it is like as we've alluded to the majority of our business, and it's the one thing like we get constant questions on. It's literally like, is this deductible? Where does this go? I got a loan, like, or it's just basically like fixing financial statements, and it it becomes very hard if you don't know what we're talking about, and it becomes a thing where it's like for some of these roles it's not my job to teach you this, like we have an intern, we have our first intern coming in, and he's
That's awesome.
yeah, and he's great when like we're very excited to have him, but he is, like a rising sophomore accounting student, like when he reached out to me again. It's like I wasn't really looking for one, but he saw what we were doing and really wanted to work here. And I remember when I first talked to him in January, he was like, "Yeah, I just took my first financial statements class." And I'm like, "I'm in the middle of tax season. You seem really nice. Let's pick this up in April." And we did, and it worked out. But it's just kind of like for a baseline level, the productization is easy to do. And there are professionals all across the country who can do this because every business needs bookkeeping, every business needs financial statements. So there is a whole plethora of professionals out there, and not just in the LA area, who are looking for like good remote work. And I've seen that myself trying to hire for these roles. And it's actually, I think, a good competitive advantage for us to have. And it's also like helps our overhead because we don't have to relocate people. We don't have to
Yeah.
like be in an office. And it's like that's the way I'm like trying to keep things as lean as possible.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. And like, how do you manage relationships? You have 50 clients, right? Five people for 50 clients. Um, who does a relationship management? How does that work?
Yeah, currently, we just kind of all do it whenever needed. As the CEO, I'm usually the first point of contact in the sales process, and then like if they have any like serious questions, my first hire, who is now our head of operations, I've started delegating more to him because I trust him a lot, and the clients really like him. I imagine in the future as we continue to grow, and that's you raise a really good point. I may need to hire dedicated account managers to manage those relationships. But we've been able to do it for the most part because our clients trust us and they see that the work that we do is good. So it's been a lot easier than you might think, but that's not to say that that won't change in the future.
Yeah. What is that like, today? So you get a new client. That client has a dedicated bookkeeper,
Hmm.
and then the relationship between the bookkeeper and the client. And if they have questions about their books, it goes to the bookkeeper. If it's a little more challenging, you intervene. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's typically how it goes. Um, and it's like obviously for some bigger clients, like I personally handle them. Um,
Yeah.
and it's funny you say that, right? Because like I know that part is not scalable. Like there will be a point where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to pass some people off. Um, but luckily we have not gotten to that point yet. And but I will say we probably will at some point.
What's the scaling challenge there? Like, if it's if like, why can't you just infinitely grow this current model?
It's basically like I think a good metaphor is insurance, right? Like, you pay money to an insurance company and the insurance company is hoping that it's not going to get thousands of claims at the same time. I think that's
Yeah.
the sort of thinking I have right now, right? Like if I personally am managing 20 clients, it's manageable if like maybe one or two of them hit me up every day. But there are some days where I'll have like seven of them hit me up with something like that is time sensitive. And then I'm like, oh crap, I have to triage this. And then I have to be up till 3 in the morning, which is not helpful for myself or my team or my company in general. And it's like it's gonna get to the point where I'm like, especially during tax season or especially during busy times when people are like I may get 11 clients hitting me up at once or 12 clients hitting me up at once. And then,
Yeah. I imagine.
it's gonna be inevitable to offend somebody. And I'd rather not get to that point. So sooner rather than later, I'm gonna probably have to have a really serious think about like a dedicated personal relationship manager who's making sure everybody's happy and good and settled. Um, but that's probably still a few months away.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's a standard. I think that's probably the most common model that I've seen, and we've done 40 episodes now, each talking about different structure. And I think the most common one is that what we'll call a pod structure, which is like account manager handles the common conversation communication between the client. They're really good at project management. They're good at client communications, and they're good at accounting and bookkeeping. But the experts are the nerds are in the back doing the details.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And is there any customer success function for you guys? Like in terms of how do you get clients to stay longer, leave reviews, to buy a different service of yours, like basically increase their LTV or LTV to CAC?
It honestly comes up organically. Like sometimes we're not like Netflix. I don't raise prices every like twice or three times a year, just for the hell of it. I really do think about if some people need a price increase. And this year I only had to raise prices on two clients, and they both accepted because I also laid out why I'm raising the prices and they understood. And then I also just have clients who like see what we do and they're like, hey, would you be willing to do X, Y, and Z? And I'll usually tell them, yeah, that's in scope, or I'm like, that's not in scope. It's going to be X amount. And we've gotten quite a bit of an increase in LTV and MRR from just doing that. In terms of leaving reviews, I don't really care about that. If I say more so the value, as I keep trying to go back to, is like if you do good work, good things will follow. So I don't really feel a need to be like, yeah, Red is 5 stars on Yelp, because like I don't think it's going to matter at the end of the day. I
Yeah.
think a lot of our clients are not going to hit us up on Yelp or Google reviews or whatever. It's going to mainly be other creators talking to their managers, their peers in the space, and just basically being like, who
Yeah.
do I go to for this? And it's like boring stuff. The answer is boring stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, okay, cool. And so kind of last question and then we'll wrap up. Um, what do you think has been the secret sauce to your structure so far? We've talked a lot about productization. Um, we've talked a lot about kind of how you set up a structure, and you're very proud of your processes, if I remember correctly, about how people work within that productized niche. Do you think those are the two things that you do kind of most uniquely to enable you to have five employees working 50 clients?
Yeah, I definitely think so, right? It is a combination of productization and then also me training and hiring the right people for this. Um, because I think like the there's a very easy model of this where you throw 20 to 30 people, maybe a mix of offshore versus onshore people, and try to like make sure every client is serviced like individually and like gets a lot of attention. But I've also found that like most people will hit you up like, not as much as you think. But you want to be ready for it when they do. And part of that is like knowing what to do when they hit you up and knowing how to do it properly and quickly. And I think that's how we've been able to run so lean, is because it's like I'm very selective in who comes to work here. I also like want to make sure that they have the right tools for it. And because we are mainly offering a productized service, I think it's a deadly combination that has enabled us to stay as lean as we have.
What about tech and AI? Like, do you use that at all to um, help scale and stay that lean?
Sometimes. We're not as AI heavy as I think a lot of other accounting firms are. I'm also like, I've seen the AI products that are out there in the accounting world, and I've not been very impressed. I think maybe the
Yeah,
best automation we do is like Intuit's auto categorize system.
yeah,
That's gotten better over the years, and it helps a lot when we bookkeep as well. We just do a spot check, but then we can usually just run it. Other than that, I think, we have automations for our emails. We use a mailing service. But for the most part, this actually, I also think, works because there is a human you can talk to at the end of the day. I've had a lot of people try to pitch me on like turning this into a software, or like, making this a SaaS product, or like, as you said, like making an AI agent just to handle everything. And
yeah.
the US tax code is so complicated. I actually think it might be the only AI proof thing out there, and they keep changing it. And like I still keep getting newsletters from like about the Trump tax bill from last year. It's like, hey, we found a new provision in this. I'm like, it's been 10 months, man. How are you still finding new provisions in this? So like, I can't imagine that AI is keeping up if like actual people are still having trouble with it. And I think it'll be that way for a bit, and I hope it stays that way. But that's kind of how we think of it, right? It should always be a tool. It should never be like a replacement. And for the most part, like when you sign up with us, like you will be talking to a person.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. We've been using QuickBooks for a while. We're now testing a AI tool called Digits to see if it can make our bookkeeping a lot easier. We'll see how it works.
Good luck to you.
Thank you. Well, cool, Varun. This has been great. Where can people find you?
You can find us at boring-stuff.com. Ironically, we're not super active on social media, but that should probably change at some point. But yeah, if you're interested, you can go to boring-stuff.com. If you're a creator interested in our services, we have a contact us button that will lead you to a form, which will get you to that deep dive form I was talking about earlier. You can also find me on LinkedIn if you're interested in connecting personally.
And what kind of creators are best fit for you guys?
We work with any type of creator across the spectrum. I would say that once you start making six figures in revenue, that's when it stops becoming a hobby, and you start considering it to be more of a full-time career, because the tax implications also start to scale up as your revenue scales up, and you don't want to be caught with a massive tax bill or just have something that's not fun to deal with. So I would say that like that's usually the sweet spot where we can help in and get set up
Awesome.
with you.
Awesome. Amazing. Amazing. Well, cool. Appreciate you having me on the show.
Of course. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Cheers.